Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this weekly AgWeather update brought to you by Farm Credit. First of all, thanks for giving me a little time last week to go on a quick family vacation. I enjoyed the time, got to relax a bit, and I'm back now to forecast, so let's talk through this. First animation we're watching here just takes us through much of the rainfall we saw on the day on Sunday getting into the overnight hours into early Monday morning. And there were some quite strong storm clusters that came through parts of North Carolina, but early this morning we're still watching quite a bit of rain moving through parts of Georgia, South and North Carolina. That's going to finish off what's been a pretty wet weekend overall. But the storms that did come through here yesterday did produce a lot of severe weather. Just take a look. We've got, in total across the country, 150 reports of severe weather. A lot of it concentrated with that storm cluster that came through here on Sunday. So a lot of wind damage out of this. We're going to wait to kind of see how things look later in the day. It's actually been a very active year with respect to severe weather across the whole of the United States, but especially here in the Carolinas down into Georgia as well. All right, total precipitation through early Monday morning. Some of the storms did deliver some heavy rainfall. You can see that weekend totals here are getting up in this 1 to 3 inch range. There were some isolated heavier rain events that hit South Carolina and Georgia over the weekend, but you can also see a lot of holes in here as well. You're probably going to hear a lot in the news about the heavy rains that have hit parts of New England. We have had in parts of Pennsylvania, New York, and then today the risk is going to be a bit farther north into Vermont, New Hampshire, of having some locally heavy rains, easily eclipsing 5, 6, 7 inches in totals. And they're going to start talking about flood probabilities. So you're going to hear like, oh, we had a 1,000-year flood event. I just want to make sure you know that when we say that means that the odds or the probability of having a flood of that magnitude in any given year is 1 in 1,000. So you can have back-to-back 1,000-year flood events. It's just the way that they're defined. So just a reminder that when you start to hear about these heavy rainfall events, that we're not talking about the fact that it's been 1,000 years since we've had a flood like this. No, that just means the probability of having a flood of that magnitude is 1 in 1,000. So heavy rains are going to be coming through New England today, but we still have more moisture that's coming through North Carolina. One of the things I just want to think about here as we think about the Carolinas into Georgia and back up into Virginia is how we've avoided drought so much this summer. There's not really been a lot of discussion about it. And we've given that a cause and a reason. We've not just seen ridges of high pressure here. So we worry about when a big ridge sets up in this area. It steals the flow. It prevents any sort of moisture getting in. And instead we just sit in kind of the inside of a big ring of fire of storms. We've not seen that this year. The flow has been problematic for other places. And then you look back over the last 30 days, we can start to see those places, like here in Missouri, pockets of Iowa, getting into Minnesota, Wisconsin, or the Pacific Northwest, or down here in the southwestern United States where the monsoon has not taken over. But this corridor in through here has had plenty of moisture. In fact, excessive moisture at times hitting these particular regions. Another way to look at this is just to examine a map showing the last 30 days in terms of percent of normal. And I show this because it's more granular. And I also want to show you this because I understand that in any summer thunderstorm regime, there are places that get missed. And so we notice that right into this part of North Carolina, you do have places that have been missed by some of the recent storms. Now, this map only goes up until yesterday on the 9th, so Sunday at 7 a.m. And storms did come through this area after that. But just to make a point that in summer, maps like this look very fragmented because of the nature of thunderstorms being such hyper-local deliverers of rain. I'm not sure if that phrase has ever been put together before. But we're just still watching a few other areas, like I mentioned, with very dry conditions. And we need to see how things are going to shape up, nationally, so we can talk about how this is going to compare to the crops we grow in through the Carolinas into Georgia. A great tool I like to use is this one. It's an NDVI analysis tool, so it looks at the difference. That's what the D in NDVI means. So it looks at the difference between infrared light in the near-infrared portion of the electromagnetic spectrum and red light, which is in the visible portion. If I just show you North Carolina's data right now, we have actually made a pretty big bounce since late June in terms of NDVI values, getting toward the top of the distribution. Going into South Carolina, we're right where we were last year at this time. And adding Georgia into here, Georgia's come down a bit off of its peaks, but still above the historical averages. So we put all three states together, and we're above the historical averages, at this point. Where the drought has recently broken, like in my home state of Illinois, we've had some very heavy rainfall come through. This ended significant risk of drought in this area. And look at what our NDVI values have done, just really skyrocketed here as of late. late. So it's just important to see these values and look at these maps across the country to kind of see how things have evolved. Now, as the sun was rising across the country today, again, a lot of cloud cover. It's going to keep us cool today, but we do have some heat coming in after this rain leaves. But overall, I want to take you back to Sunday and just show you what this pattern is up to, all right? There are ridges building in the west. There's broader troughs that are trying to set up, here and dip some cooler air at times into the southeast. And I do want to note that there is wildfire smoke still from the Canadian prairie stretching through much of the Midwest. We can see it easily as the sun sets because of the very oblique angle at which the sun's light comes in. You just get more reflection off of this, and therefore we can see it better with our satellites. But one thing that really must be discussed at this point is we've kind of talked about the continent, what's going on in terms of ocean temperatures, because this might be where the best signal is to tell you what I'm expecting for the longer range. And here's what's changed. The water temperatures in the Atlantic just continue to boil. Very warm compared to normal. We're going to talk about that in a second. But what's changed has been El Nino continue to develop and extremely warm water hitting this part of the North Pacific. Now, why this is important for the southeast is because this can end up being very disruptive to the flow over the west. It just tends to promote, whenever you get heat that builds into this area, it tends to promote more ridging in the west. And if the ridging is in the west, it's not in the east. So what we end up doing here is we end up getting a ridge that kind of builds in here and then into the west, and then another one that builds here toward Greenland. And we get stuck in the middle of this, which is a good place to be. You don't want to be under one of those large ridges. But thinking about all of these pieces working together, I want to show you some data here. El Nino continues to go. Okay, and we'll take a look at the very end where we expect it to go. It's warmed up since late April, a full degree Celsius. That's a lot. I know it may not seem like much, but it is for the ocean temperatures. And it's projected to go another degree above that as we work our way toward late summer and fall. But it's the Atlantic and the Gulf of Mexico and the Caribbean I want to focus in on. You're probably going to hear a lot about this in the news as well, because this is a map looking at current ocean temperatures in the Gulf of Mexico. And to tell you that this is primed for hurricane season is a bit of an understatement. You got to have ocean temperatures at least 28 degrees Celsius, that's about 80 degrees Fahrenheit, in order to build a hurricane. And we are well above that here. Look at this. These temperatures are in the 30s Celsius. So this is above like 86, 87 degrees Fahrenheit. But down here off of Florida, take a look at this. This area is up here at the end of the color bar, which 32.1 degrees Celsius is 90 Fahrenheit. So the ocean temperatures here are extremely warm. And if you come up and look at the whole of the Atlantic, so just zoom out and look at the whole of it, our ocean temperatures are still well above the climatological normals, and they are matching what we typically are at the peak of hurricane season later. We can also see that right here along the Gulf Stream, there's quite a bit of warmth as well. These ocean temperatures, out here again above that 28 degree 28 degrees Celsius number. And my point behind just stressing this is that as we look out as to what we expect in terms of tropical cyclone activity, while things are quiet right now, we have one system way out here in the Atlantic that's got a 30% chance of developing. We do need to be aware that this whole area, despite El Nino, could really potentially give us a lot of tropical cyclone activity. I'll show you this again at the end of this forecast video. As it stands, looking at some satellite data right now, there is not much going on. So just as the sun was rising here early on Monday, you don't see any large clusters of thunderstorms kind of following in what we call the main development region, which is in through here. Now, if you notice there's some haze in this, there's two causes for that. The first is sun glint. This is the sun rising. So you're getting a bright reflection of it off of the ocean surface. Again, that's called sun glint, all right? But the other thing here is there's some African dust, some Saharan dust coming out in this. And you can see in this forecast animation that dust is kind of moving across the open Atlantic, getting to the Caribbean. It's not yet to us here in the Carolinas or down into Georgia. But sometimes this time of year, this dust can just be problematic for getting tropical systems to get going. So we'll watch out for this very carefully going forward as this hurricane season, progresses. And just remember, here we are, July the 10th. Over the next 3 months, this is when this system, the tropical cyclone, building ability here across the Atlantic just starts to really ramp up. Now, let me shrink that up for you and show you what needs to change. This is a map that shows you June 1st to July the 7th. And there's a couple of things on this map that are going to be quite different. One of the big things is this right here. We've had anomalously low pressure in this area for a while. It's what's helped keep anomalously low pressure in this area for a while. It's made ridges here. It's made ridges there. This is the displacement of the Bermuda High. And instead of having that Bermuda High sitting here or here, we've had low pressure in this area. Now, this is how the pattern has been. What is changing in this pattern is going to be significant for not only our precipitation, but also our temperatures. Because over the last 30 days, we've just not had heat. It's just not been here. We've been warm. It's not as though it hasn't felt like summer, but we have not packed in a lot of excessive heat. I think this map, again, which shows you average temperature ranks for the previous 30 days, is going to start to shift around quite a bit. And here's some of the reason as to why. We do know that in the near term, we have a large ridge that's building here, while there are deeper troughs of low pressure that sit between the Hudson Bay and the Great Lakes. But it's going to be the opening of a larger ridge into the west and kind of the fading of these broader troughs, like this is the one that brought the rain in this past weekend, they're going to start to fade away. And this is very symptomatic of what El Nino typically does this time of year. And I want to show you that because here's a forecast for the next 10 days of what the jet stream is supposed to do. So these are wind speeds, and we're looking for the bright colors to tell us what the jet stream's up to. So right now we keep seeing these deeper troughs, but as I play forward, you start to see that the jet makes a bit of a northward retreat. It's kind of running through this area as a ridge opens up to the south. Now that's going to really affect the position of the deeper trough that's to the north. And why I'm telling you this is because this is going to stop the really cold intrusions of air, and cold is relative. I'm talking about this time of year getting into the southeast. So playing this forward into Wednesday, Thursday, a lot of storm clusters are going to run through this area. But we no longer have just the deep kind of lower heights in this region keeping the cooler weather around. So as a result, even though no big ridge is building in, the lack of deep troughs getting into the southeast means that, well, just the flow is going to be there to let some warmer conditions back in. Now, you know what warmer conditions do for us this time of year. As long as there's moisture in place, and there is, we just get a daily cadence of pop-up thunderstorms. And as we play through the middle of this month of July, I see that being the case. A lot of stronger flow coming into this area. But, getting one of these troughs to just really dip down here like they've been doing just doesn't seem to be the case. So let's go have a look at what this means. This is the next 7 days of total accumulated precipitation as predicted by the WPC. There's the corridor that's opening up for our kind of biggest thunderstorm events. But we still have decent chances of adding more precipitation into North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, even up into Virginia. But there are going to be some holes with this, and the models have kind of tried to identify some of those drier locations. And as I show you the temperature starting to come up here, we just need to see if there's anything significant in the pattern that could point toward drought development. Because, I've been told this a million times by folks in the Carolinas. They always just say, we're a week away from drought all the time. And let's just assess that and kind of look at this going forward. Today, early in the morning here on Monday, our all hazards weather map has us in the clear. There's some dense fog to our west over in parts of, into parts of Kentucky and Tennessee. There's the flood issues going on in New England, the heat across the south, and look at the heat building into the western United States. Today, we're going to watch the system clear out, and by later today, our flow kind of weakens, higher pressure builds in, which means we're going to watch farther to the west for the risk of the strongest storms. So this is today's severe weather outlook. You can notice that we have most of our storm activity here. Getting in tomorrow, it's going to be following this front that dives into the Midwestern United States, and then getting out here toward Thursday. So today, after the rain moves out, we do get a few days, this is Wednesday, where we get a bit of a break. But we got to see when and where the rain starts to return. So through this morning, we're going to continue to watch this move through our area, locally heavy rainfall out of the system that still exits. But then this is by Monday night, things clear out. Getting into Tuesday, there will be isolated, showers possible, but very low probabilities. And through Wednesday, much of the activity is through the western part, of the United States into the central U.S. Okay, bigger picture though. European model does this through Wednesday into Thursday and starts to bring in better chances of rain for parts of the southeast by the end of the week. But if you just play this out and go all the way out for a full week, we just notice a similar setup to the WPC. That's our storm corridor right in the middle here. Now, the European model has this big dry pocket right into this area. See it? And it's interesting to show you that the GFS doesn't. It tries to fill that area in. So this is the GFS, European over the next 7 days. Same forecast, GFS, European, just different forecasts overall. And that's because we have yet to see how the storm systems that are coming out of the Midwest get over the Appalachian Mountains. That's going to be key here. But we can look at this and compare the models. And just notice, these colors represent where the GFS is wetter. These represent where the European is wetter. European's wetter east. The GFS is wetter west. That's what you've got here. Now, from this point, I want to give you the probability maps. Are we going to be drier? Is there a risk of being drier here? Well, this is the chance of getting less than a ½ inch of rainfall through the next 10 days. And you can see it's in that 20 to 30% range here, some places getting up closer to 50%. So there is showing up in the ensembles the risk of being drier. But if we flip this over to who's going to be wetter, this is now the probability of getting more than an inch of rain. Much of Georgia, just part of North and South Carolina and through here. Some of this includes the rain this morning, okay? But we do see, still a lack of drought development kind of conditions. Overall, I like this. This is good. I don't want to be getting closer to running the risk of developing drought. From there, let's look at the week 2 pattern. CPC keeps you above average. The European model, near normal. The GFS is the off kind of map. And I'm just going to make a point here about the GFS. It always struggles with knowing what the precipitation pattern is going to be in the southeast. It just has an odd bias of always being too dry in this particular area. So let's just keep an eye on these other forecast maps in comparison to the GFS. And at this point, I don't have any reason to tell you to be on the lookout for drought stress. Now, the temperatures are going to be a little bit of a different story. Let me take you back to today. So we know we're cooler today. There it is, Monday. All right, so we're struggling to get out of the low 80s. But as we play through Tuesday into Wednesday, notice the heat that builds in here later this week. So we start to see 90s. Now, we're not strangers to 90s, but it's been a while since we've seen, low to mid 90s. And as we get out there toward Friday and Saturday and Sunday, that just sticks around. So I'm going to watch everywhere south of that line and west of that line for the risk of having more higher temperatures moving into the middle part of this month. We can see that in the ensembles. As I just play you out this 5-day sliding window of average temperature anomalies. This is day 5 through 10, which gets us out to the 20th of July. There it is. You notice that this is where the heat is starting to return to the United States. And even the cooler weather that's in the Midwest starts to fade once we get into that 3rd week of July. I think there's a chance that we finish out this month of July getting into August with kind of quite a bit of warmth across much of North America. But a lot of July is going to be on the cooler side of things. Just to show you the Climate Prediction Center, CPC, Climate Prediction Center, on Friday did put this area down for the risk, a slight risk of excessive heat from the 15th to the 21st. And to be honest, that's really the first time I've seen them do that. But keep an eye on the CPC's website. They'll update this later today, and we'll see if they continue to keep that in the forecast. Based off of what I'm seeing here, I imagine they will. Okay, the ensembles are picking up on this warmer bias. All right, from there, new CPC long-range data has been released. And let's go back and bring it up here. So this is what they're seeing for the 22nd through the 4th. All right, they've got a corridor opening up in here that they expect to stay wetter. And you notice that if it's going to be hot, there's that same line I drew for you just a few moments ago. So really in agreement with some of the analysis we did here in the near term. But what about the European model? The European model's forecast, which is shown here, is kind of got just a little bit of a different story. You do see the heat, but notice a bit more of a drier signal in this area. Now, we always call this into question, especially if bigger ridges build west, because you end up getting these thunderstorm clusters that cascade over the top of this and do end up in the southeast. They end up in the Carolinas as well. So we'll watch this carefully, but this is the July 20 to August 20 outlook, brand new from the European model here. All right. Next, we did get new long-range data last week, and I'm going to share that with you. I'm going to go past July and look at August, September, October. And this is what I'm really going to be keeping an eye on. Do you see this corridor in the European model suggesting a lot of activity coming off of Africa? Now, the model is attempting to bring that all the way into this area, which means despite El Nino, we could be talking about a much more active, tropical cyclone season. It will all depend on where the high pressure sits. Does it sit farther to the north? Does it build itself back to the west? Does it shift south at all? Gosh, it has been displaced so far north so far this year that we have to just question where the flow is going to come from to support these tropical systems. But I want to let you know right now that the models are trying to really activate this and get this going in kind of a bigger way. When we look out there at the same time period from the National Multi-Model Ensemble, you see it. It's a little different projection, but you can see right into this area that they are still hesitant to develop drought here and potentially call for a more active tropical cyclone season, August, September, October. That's your latest update from our two main global models. But as I talked about earlier, we still need to keep an eye on what's happening in the Pacific Ocean too. And El Nino is projected to continue to develop, possibly adding another degree Celsius above average, which will put this at a strong to possibly very strong kind of status going forward into late summer and into fall. And if we think about what that might mean historically, this map kind of gives us our best indications. Let's blow that up. This would be what happens in August to November whenever we have an El Nino developing. And we just tend to be a positive correlation with precipitation, meaning wetter. In fact, the only place it shows up with a stronger, drier signal is the Pacific Northwest. And you say, why? The jet just likes to fly through this area during that time period. So I kind of started off this video with a bit of a theme, and it was about drought and the worry of drought. And I'm just letting you know that we don't have strong signals right now on July the 10th of this developing. Now, as you all know, this could change at any moment. And if it does, I will be sure to keep you on top of it. But as of today, these are some of the stronger indicators that I've got. One last thing, if you got another 30 seconds, I do want to give you a quick global update. All right. After a very stormy June and early July, much of Europe is going over drier. We can also see wetter weather trying to come into some of China's key growing areas. Australia, which has been surprisingly wet this is fall and early winter for them, has a drier signal. Drought repair is happening down in Argentina and southern Brazil out of this forecast as well. But just keep an eye on what's coming off of Africa as we go forward. I think that's going to be the most important thing for us as we go headlong into this hurricane season. It seems to be a lot of activity beginning to kick off in this area, and it does seem to have support to get across the Atlantic once it does get going. It's not there now, but we'll be watching it very soon. Okay, have a good rest of your week, and I'll talk to you next Monday. Thanks.